Whoa, welcome back, my friends. I can't even remember what chapter we're on, so you're going to have to look at the title below. But I do want to say it's chapter 23. Sorry for the tardiness and whatnot. If you've paid attention to my channel, you'll know what's going on in my life. We moved out of our apartment into a camper with intent to save money to buy our own home, and we were slowly progressing at that. We are still in the camper. But I figured this morning, it is a Thursday morning at 7:20 in the morning, and I figured I would read a long overdue chapter. Now, this chapter I skimmed through. It is quite long, and I'm kind of short-winded at these things, and I start to fumble, and it gets hard to listen to, so I'm going to split this chapter up into two parts. So here we go. The next chapter, Koalas are full of chlamydia. So apparently, I'm really leaving for the Australian outback tomorrow, I said to the stormtrooper beside me. His look was one of surprise or horror. Honestly, it's hard to tell what a stormtrooper is even thinking, even if you've been married to him for 17 years. I blame the helmet. You can't even find your way through the mall without asking for help, Victor responded with mild disbelief, unconsciously gripping his firearm made of PVC pipe. Just a reminder, since last time, Victor is her husband. This whole trip is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. You bought a used movie-grade stormtrooper costume so that you could join a troop of strangers who visit sick kids in hospitals. You don't even like healthy kids. I'm pretty sure you're not in any position to judge what's ridiculous. He shook his head, still baffled, and I was going through with this. But he was right. I was fucked. It was Halloween when I was spending what might be my last night alive in America, chasing after a 9-year-old, sugar-riddled zombie Red Riding Hood while my stormtrooper husband hopped through the neighborhood with us. At the last minute, I'd surprise him by dressing up as Darth Vader so that when he was suited up, I could jump out and scream, "Victor, I am your boss!" He was not amused. I tried the death grip, but he refused to lean backward in a visible choke. It was probably because I got Victor dressed in his 27-piece outfit he found that was unable to sit, lean, bend over, or even put on his own shoes without help. It's really not that different from how most women feel after getting spanked up for date night. But as a man, he was utterly out of his element. He was like a knight, but wearing PVC in a unitard instead of a suit of armor. Honestly, if the rebels knew what I knew, they would have just pushed all the stormtroopers over like dominoes, leaving them awkwardly rock like turtles who have accidentally rolled over on their backs. I suspect the stormtroopers' wives, who obviously had to help them completely dress and undress every day, went into their marriages knowing that they were likely going to be young widows. It's sad, but I'm letting the dark side had good life insurance plans. But I'm betting the dark side had good life insurance plans. The dark side always seemed very organized and vaguely Republican. This whole Australia trip thing had started a month ago when my friend Laura asked if I'd come with her on a group sponsored by the people who want you to go to Australia. I said no because I'm the only person in the world who hates to travel, and because I knew that everything in Australia wants to kill you violently and painfully as possible. Laura sighed and told me to keep an open mind, and in my defense, it's very hard to keep saying no to the person who once voluntarily chased off vultures with a shovel and helped you dig up decomposing corpses in scorching Texas heat of your backyard. I'd explain the last sentence, but it's all in my first book. Go buy that and read it. It's probably on sale. I'll wait. Also, pick up some donuts. You look too thin. Eat something. Done? Excellent. Back to the story. The whole Australia thing was a do stuff on your life list, even sponsored by Tourism Australia, so we get a free trip as long as we wrote about it later. I reminded Laura that the very first thing on my life is to never write a fucking life list. She then reminded me that I was being cynical again and pointed out that it was basically a free ticket to do anything that we wanted as long as it was on our life list. Really? I asked skeptically. Can I box a kangaroo? Laura stared at me. Do you want to box a kangaroo? Well, no, not really, I admitted. But I'd like to know what that I have the option, except I don't want any kangaroos to get hurt. So maybe pudding wrestling with kangaroos. Is that a thing? The problem is, I don't think kangaroos are naturally that fighty. No, I replied vehemently. Kangaroos are mean bastards who totally box each other in the wild. If anything, we're making it safer for everyone by putting mittens on their hands. They also smoke cigars while they're doing it, so they're polluting the environment too. Kangaroos don't give a shit about secondhand smoke. Laura raised an eyebrow. Seriously, I saw it in a cartoon from the 50s. If you guys hear any noise in the backgrounds, it's my dogs, because I can never really read any of these chapters without them getting a drink or playing with a squeaky toy or their nails clicking and clacking on the floor. Every time, it never fails. She sighed deeply. Everything you know about Australia you learn from cartoons. This is exactly why you need to go. Did you know there's a town in Australia full of ghosts and possibly lots of serial killers? I perked up. We should go there. Is it on our life list? Well, it is now, I muttered, seemingly somewhat accusingly. Can we go hold koalas while dressed in full koala costumes? And would you be more likely to say yes if I tell you I already had the costumes? Laura stared at me. You have 2 koala costumes? Well, yes. You need to back up in case one's dirty. Laura. Huh? I'm kidding, I said. But I do have 1 koala costume and 1 panda costume, and they're both sort of bears, so that should count. Laura didn't respond, but that was probably because she was thinking that koalas aren't actually bears. Technically, pandas seem more like giant raccoons than bears. So I suspect she decided not to bring it up because she's good at picking her battles. Laura suggested that we take a sleeper train through Australia since I hated to fly, and I grudgingly admitted that I had always wanted to go on the Orient Express, but that I'd sort of consider it a wasted opportunity if a murder didn't happen. It's not that I'm particularly bloodthirsty, it's just that I have standards, and it seems like it's not the full sleeper train experience if there isn't a murder provided. I considered that if I wrote it down on my life list, then Australia would be forced to provide a murder for me. But then I worried that they'd be all about enabling and supporting and would instead make me responsible for planning the murder. And I can't even organize my sock drawer, much less a murder. Laura seemed concerned that I was putting too much thought into this possible murder, but I think it's just because she's a professional event planner and this stuff is second nature to her. Laura needs to realize that not everyone is born with natural organizational skills she has. If they were, then there would be festive murders happening all the time. Ones with hors d'oeuvres and charitable donations and chocolate fountains and mason jars and paper straws and souvenir bags with human ears in them. Laura looked at me oddly when I said that, but I think it's just because she can't take compliments well, or maybe because human ear party bags are so 2011. I don't really know. I'm terrible at keeping up with trends. So no Australia about 8 billion times until Laura finally said, "You're always going on about forcing yourself to be furiously happy and pushing past your comfort level to really live your life. Well, this is one of those times, sister, so buckle up, Buttercup, and get your work visa." She raised her voice, screaming victoriously and slightly intimidatingly, "We're going to see the wild side, bitches!" And so I said yes. And Australia said yes. And my therapist said I'd need extra therapy sessions. And the woman scheduling our itinerary said, "I'll set everything up and tell you what you're going to be doing less than 12 hours before you actually leave the States." And she did. The trip was to be based of life goals we wanted to kick off our bucket list. And Laura said I started putting together goals that we actually wanted to accomplish. But we'd probably never do it if we were paying for it on our own. Mostly because we're cheap bastards and terrible at booking hotels. My original list reads as follows. Lick David Tennant's face. 2. Ride a golden unicorn. 3. Wish for more wishes. Laura pointed out that life lists weren't the same as genie wishes and made me start again. I revised it to ride on camels and watch giant cockroach races and see where The Hobbit was filmed. But then Australia was like, that's New Zealand. Again, New Zealand is not Australia, so please stop asking. So then I added, put New Zealand inside Australia so I can see hobbits to my life list. I think they kind of have to do it now, I explained to Laura. It's like I'm Alan Rickman in Die Hard and Australia is a baffled hostage negotiator. I think I could probably ask them to bring me a dump truck filled with live slow lorsies and a young Sean Connery. They'd have to do it. I am drunk with power, Laura suspected. I was also drunk with wine slushies. Technically, we were both right. I considered that it was entirely possible that this whole setup was a trick and that I would get there and be forced to spend a week trapped at some sort of terrible timeshare meeting. Or maybe that it was a sting to arrest me for unpaid parking tickets. But it was also possible I'd be riding camels in Middle Earth and it seemed to be worth the risk. After all, it's Neustralia. Anything could happen. Neustralia is the name I made up for when they come to their senses and drop New Zealand onto Australia. You're welcome, Australian Tourism Board. I'm giving you that one for free. People warned us that everything in Australia wants to kill you, but I think they're overreacting. Australia doesn't want to kill you. It's more like an exclusive club for people who care very little about being alive. Australia is really a lot like Texas if Texas were mad at you and drunk and maybe had a knife. Like in Australia, they have dangerous funnel web spiders. In Texas, we have funnel cakes. I don't know what funnel spiders are, but they sound significantly less delicious than fried cake. They're probably equally bad for you, though. People warned us of drop bears, mythical bears that fall out of the trees and eat you, and you're supposed to put forks in your hair to scare them away from your head. I'm not sure why Australia feels the need to make up deadly creatures when they're already crawling with them. It's probably to identify the tourists by all the forks in their hair. We do that in Texas with snipe hunts, but you'll usually end up finding something to shoot anyway, so no one's really mad when they find out that snipes are made up. Then again, watching for trees and putting forks in your hair is probably a good thing as it keeps out the flying foxes. Those are real, by the way, enormous megabats with 5-foot wingspans, which live in the park and better named enormous rats with wings that envelop you. Excuse me, I had a hard time. I wanted to say envelope there. We actually saw some flying foxes around Darling Harbor, which seems an unfortunate name. I don't like a place that's randomly gives itself a compliment. A helpful Australian tried to tell me it was named after a guy whose last name was Darling, but I wasn't having it. I don't love it, I explained. It insists on itself. The man nodded noncommittedly, deciding it was better not to argue with a strange foreigner dressed in a fully bodied koala costume because it was cold and she didn't bring a coat. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Laura and I thought about leaving traps all over Australia, cardboard boxes propped up by sticks with babies inside of them, to see if we could catch any dingoes, but then Laura pointed out that it was probably BYOB, bring your own baby. And I never remembered to pack phone chargers, so we crossed that one out. We asked if Greg from the Wiggles, could drive us around in the big red car, and the Australian Tourism Board seemed a little hesitant, so instead we decided to make things easier for them by keeping it simple. There's a list of goals here that I'll read, and there's a story to go along with. So, goal number 1, hug a koala while dressed as a koala. I plan to dress as a koala so that koalas would know what it's like to be held by a koala, because turnabout is a fair play. Except, honestly, they didn't just want you to put them down. People are constantly picking them up without asking first. Koalas are the new dwarves. Just because they're smaller than you, it doesn't give you the right to pick them up without asking. But that doesn't mean I don't want to go to a reserve where there are tons of them and rake them up in a pile and jump on them like they're a furry leaf pile. Koalas, that is, not dwarves. Not that I would jump on piles of koalas or dwarves. Sometimes we're made from stuff that we want to do but don't actually follow through on. Like when someone is an asshole and you want to burn down their garage. But then you don't because it's illegal and also because you can't find the matches. I'm made of a lot of unfulfilled arson and unjumped on koala piles. I told Laura I was tempted to make a koala fall in love with me so that I could sneak it home in my backpack. But she pointed out that I didn't even bring a backpack. I'm a terrible planner. Maybe I should dress like a eucalyptus tree because they really like to hang on them and it'll put them at ease, I said. And then I'll rub Vicks Vapor Rub all over me because I think menthol and eucalyptus are pretty much the same thing. And I'll give them, menthol cigarettes to smoke. Those fucking koalas are going to love me. Laura agreed. I read that they're all slothy and out of it because the eucalyptus that they eat is poisonous, and so they spend their whole life trying to digest toxins. They probably do want saving. They eat toxic shit all day. Someone needs to give them a steak to chew on. Or some pound cake and multivitamin, I added. Plus, tons of them have chlamydia. Luckily, koala chlamydia is not contagious to people, though. Laura added. Huh? Does it feel like human chlamydia? I asked. I don't know. I never had human chlamydia, she replied. Laura can be a real braggart sometimes. The more I considered it, the more I realized how much I have in common with these koalas. We're both immune compromised, lightly diseased, exhausted, and full of toxins. I'm totally a koala. I'm more of a kangaroo, Laura replied after a moment of thought. I'm laid back until you push me a bit too far, then I split your stomach open and walk away while you bleed to death. And that's why I keep on your good side, I said. I'm also a Hufflepuff because I'm lactose intolerant and I get distracted by birds. Laura didn't respond, but in her defense, it was a lot to take in. My hopes of smuggling a live koala out of the country were significantly dampened, though, when it took the koala wranglers 2 weeks just to approve my koala costume because they were afraid that the fleecy costume would terrify and startle the koalas. I finally got approved, but when we got to the Sydney Zoo, we were told that we were not on the list, and we're certainly not going to be holding any of their koalas. Possibly the koala costume threw them off. I explained that we'd specifically been told we could come here to snuggle koalas and that my outfit had been approved weeks in advance, and they looked at me in a way that made me think they'd called security. I am way too familiar with that look. We pulled out our paperwork and they sighed in relief, and they told us that we'd come to the wrong place and we wanted the Wildlife Sydney Zoo, which is not the same thing as the Sydney Zoo. Just how many zoos do you people need? I asked. They only recently started calling themselves a zoo, so it's confusing to people, the clerk explained. Catch the bus back and ask the driver to take you to the aquarium. Awesome, Laura said. We're going to hold a bunch of aquatic koalas. I didn't even know those existed. They don't exist, replied the clerk. Great, I replied. Then we get to hold a bunch of drowned koalas. This isn't quite the day I expected. 30 minutes later, we made it to the right spot and found the zoo was part of an aquarium and wax museum conglomerate and was nice but fairly tiny compared to the zoo we had just been thrown out of. We found our way to the koala enclosement. Spell check says koala enclosement isn't a real thing and it wants me to change it to koala enslavement. Clearly, spell check feels very strongly about koalas in captivity. Victor says enclosement is not a real word, but I just put it in a book, so it's a real word now, Victor. I told the people working there that I had to hold a koala, and they looked at me as if I'd said I was there to hack the limbs off of tiny babies. Turns out it's been illegal to hold koalas in that particular part of Australia for years. But I wasn't giving up because they'd already approved my costume, so they must have known we were here to nuzzle koalas. They called management and found that I was actually only approved to wear the koala costume while staring at the koalas. I tried to politely argue my way into holding them, but they told me that even David Hasselhoff had only been allowed to stand near them, and that's when I gave up. Because if the Hoff can't love on a koala, I sure as hell wasn't going to get to. And I suppose they had good reason to be protective of their koalas, since clearly someone had given a great number of them chlamydia. But then again, if they're all rampant with chlamydia already, it's not like they're going to get more chlamydia. If anything, they'd be concerned about their koalas giving me chlamydia, but I was willing to take that chance. I really wanted to say I held a koala, and also because I was pretty sure there were shots to cure chlamydia now. Surprisingly, this argument only baffled the koala keepers, but they were very sweet and apologetic for the disappointment and did agree to let me go in the enclosure to photobomb a koala. And there is a picture here. I will post that. Not quite as romantic as I was hoping for, but at least the koala wasn't overly panicked when he saw me. He looks terrified, doesn't he? Again, there's a picture here you'll be able to see. Answer: no, he doesn't, because he's fucking asleep. I suspected they were all on high quaaludes, and I was a little bit jealous. I probably would have drawn a Sharpie mustache on him if he still would have stayed in whatever crazy fever dream koalas have. I think the lesson here is that you shouldn't get your hopes up about holding koalas, but technically they smell weird and tons of them have chlamydia, so maybe this was the universe's way of saving me from myself, or from chlamydia. Note: I have several friends who went to the parts of Australia where you can still hold a koala, and they all said that it was sweet, but that the koalas are very heavy and a bit stinkier than you'd expect. They suggested that if you really wanted to hold a koala but can't, just get a furry pillowcase and fill it with lightly used cat litter, or tie a bunch of sedated raccoons together, or maybe hold a dead koala. I probably should have asked, do you have any koalas that are already dead from the shock of being cuddled? Because we were fine with that. We're not picky, unlike these fucking koalas. I'm sure that would have gone over well. Now that I think about it, it's possible that sleeping koalas at the enclosure weren't even sleeping. They were probably taxidermied, and they just got hot glued to them They just got hot glued them to the branch. That's probably why you can't even pet them, because hot glue melts in Australia because it's boiling so often. And that's why you can't jostle dead koalas on trees. They'll just fall right off the trees, and then the jig is up. Goal number 2. See the world's biggest something. Australia has a love for big things, like Big Prawn, 30 feet, or Big Slurpee, 36 feet. I wanted to see the Big Banana, 43 feet. Laura didn't even know that there was such a thing, but once she heard about it, she wanted to go too. Unfortunately, we were in the wrong part of Australia for most of the big things. We heard rumors on the internet of Big Potato, which would only take us a day to find. And so we rented a car. We could drive many, many hours so that we could see Australia's Big Potato. Except it isn't actually a potato. It's a cement sculpture in the shape of a potato. It's right by a gas station, and we asked locals where to find it. They said, "What? You mean the big turd?" Apparently, it's lovingly referred to as a big turd potato. A potato. It was awesome. I'm not even being sarcastic about this. Just look at it. And there is a picture here I will show you. It kind of looks like a turd, I guess. It doesn't really look like a potato to me. But anyway, it took 2 of us working on it in tandem just to drive to Potato, because Australia is filled with roundabouts and everyone drives on the wrong side of the road. In the end, we decided to split up the work, and I feverishly watched the GPS and yelled, "Left, right, roundabout," while Laura white-knuckled followed my instruction and glared at people daringly to easily drive on the wrong side of the road. Roundabouts presented the most difficulties. Instead of red lights and yield signs, everyone just drives in a circle until they find the place that they want out. I'm sure they have got to be some part of the rules to this about we didn't know. And so we just drive in with our windows down, pointing and screaming, "We're going that way, so please don't hit us," to the people in nearby cars. A pile of dogs could have driven better than us. We never used our blinker properly in Australia. The knob you think is going to be your blinker is the knob that turns on the windshield wiper. So we had almost no driving skills, and the windshield wiper was constantly on for no reason at all. I bet rental places in Australia can probably tell when Americans have rented their cars because the windshield wipers always need to be replaced. Additionally, everything is measured in clicks and meters and liters, and neither Laura nor I knew how to convert metric to imperial, so the GPS would show that we needed to turn in 2 kilometers. I'd say, be prepared to turn in 2 minutes or 2 hours, I don't know which. Laura looked at me in frustration, but never learned it either, so she couldn't say much. "There's too much math on this vacation," I complained, like a whiny American. "I've gone 39 years without learning the metric system, and I'm not going to pussy out now. If I did it, it'd be like admitting to Miss Johnson that I would have to use this one day." Laura nodded in agreement. "Fuck it," I said. "From now on, I'm just going to measure everything in babies. Lengthwise, everyone knows how long a baby is, so it's totally universal. The math people will probably be mad about having to convert everything through. This is probably how God felt when people stopped measuring arcs into cubits." "Or measuring arcs at all," Laura replied. We eventually drove into the bush where we were expected for a camp that night. "This place is very bushy," I said, using the words to describe things. "Super bushy," Laura replied. "The bushiest." I felt sure Australia would be grateful they'd sent such wordsmiths on this trip. When we arrived at the campsite, we realized it was less camping and more glamping or glamorous camping. The tent was already set up for us, and there was an outdoor bathtub and mosquito nets. There was also a lodge nearby that offered fancy food, booze, hot tea, and plugs to recharge our stuff. We met up with Ben, whose name might actually have been Ben, or it might be something else, whose family owned and operated the campground. He had dinner with us. It was avocado ice cream with popcorn and Tabasco sauce soup. There's a lot of weird shit happening here all at once. Laura on Australian cuisine. What's in my mouth? Me on the same thing. Ben told us about the costume party he'd been to last week, and he dressed up as a vagina, and the guy who was with him dressed up as tweezers to go with the vagina. It was then that I started to suspect that Ben didn't know how vaginas work. Then he exclaimed, "No, wait, not a tweezer, the other thing, a speculum." Then the other diners jumped up a bit and stared at us, with jealousy, I suspect. Ben assured us that our fear of sleeping in the bush was unfounded. His exact words were, "No worries, mates. She'll be apples," which is apparently Australian for calm your ass down. I asked if there were any rhinos nearby and explained that everything I knew about the bush I learned from The Gods Must Be Crazy when I was in 2nd grade. Then Ben pointed out that the movie was about the bush of Botswana. So basically everything I know about Australia is Botswana. We explained that our fear of the bush was primarily opossums because they like to make wigs out of Laura's hair. Ben hesitantly admitted that it might not all be apples because we were assigned to sleep in something named Possum Tent. But he did assure us that Australia's possums were adorable and not angry, giant teeth, hissing menaces that we'd had in Texas. There is a picture here of a possum. I will post that as well. One caution, though, he said, absolutely no food in your tent, because that will attract wild animals. Yes, I paused, but Laura and I are made of meat. Ben assured us that we'd be fine, and sweetly added, please don't murder our possums. Ours are well behaved and won't eat your face off. Ben gave us what he called a torch, but we called it a tiny keychain flashlight that seemed to have a short in it because it kept turning off as Laura and I walked through the dense bush alone and shivering. Then we turned directly onto a path with giant possum in the middle of it. Laura was so scared she screamed out, Amanda! Which is weird because who the hell is Amanda? Later she said she screamed out nonsensical phrase made from pure fear and too many vowels, but I suspect that she has unresolved issues with this Amanda person. Either way, that's when the flashlight went out and we were stuck in complete darkness with the sound of animals scurrying either toward us or away from us. Protect your hair, I yelled, and I considered covering her hair with my hands, but I was afraid she might think my hands were possums and knife me. Laura's awesome, but she's a bit of a loose cannon when it comes to hair possums. But then the flashlight came back on and the possum was gone. I considered telling Laura it was probably just a ghost possum, but I worried that it might make her more freaked out. We finally got to our tent and we put our kangaroo and koala costumes. We finally put on our kangaroo and koala costumes. I apologize. I'd packed because I was unexpectedly freezing and also because we thought if wild animals got in during the night, they'd think we were one of them and wouldn't eat us. I'm not ashamed to say that at one point we made Blair Witch-esque videos saying goodbye to our families in case we didn't make it. I am ashamed to say that I tried to distract Laura with tales I heard the day before during a dolphin watching trip. Sadly, all I'd really learned is that dolphins are super rapey. True story. I don't know why anyone wants to swim with them. Spell check is trying to cover it up by saying rapey isn't a word, but it is. Male dolphins can go into murderous rages of sexual frustration and will even gang rape female dolphins at times. Laura looked at me like I'd gone insane, and I realized I'd just been talking about scary Australian animals again. But I pointed out that it's not as if a land dolphin was likely to come across us in our tent. At least, not this far inland. Probably. Please stop talking about rapey dolphins, Laura said. Got it, I replied. Changing the subject to something lighter, the dolphin tour also pointed out a private island that no one is allowed on because there are penguins there who need to be protected. According to scientists, seems sort of suspect though. Penguins in Australia that no one is allowed to see? I think the scientists are lying and just want their own private island. That's probably how the Culligans got theirs. Or maybe just stop talking in general, Laura suggested. And so I did. The next morning, I chased a family of wild kangaroos towards Laura while she was taking a bath outside of our tent. I did this out of friendship. Sometimes you have to explain these things, apparently. And that's where we're going to end part 1 here, my friends. Next time we start off, obviously part 2, we'll be starting on goal number 3. This has taken way longer than I expected, but hey, we're back to reading this book. Again, this has been Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson, and I hope you guys come back and listen to the rest. I hope I've gotten a little bit better at reading this story to you guys. Y'all stay safe, stay healthy, and y'all be good to each other. We'll see you next time.